Welcome, everybody, to Zeta Global Radio. I am Lainie Sevante Wulkan, and I am thrilled at today's show. For many of you know who our special guest is, and for those of you who are just listening to Zeta Global Radio or just becoming acquainted with us, learning the world of awakening, learning the world of consciousness and spirituality, you're in for a real treat. And I'm pleased to welcome to our show Gregg Braden, who is a 5-time New York Times bestselling author, researcher, educator, lecturer, and internationally renowned as a pioneer, bridging modern science, ancient wisdom, and human potential. So we get to learn all about what that means, all rolled up into one. I also want to mention Gregg has presented his discoveries in over 30 countries on 6 continents and has been invited to speak to the United Nations, Fortune 500 companies, and the U.S. military. So without further ado, let's say hello to Gregg Braden. So glad to have you here on ZGR.
Hi, Lainie. I am thrilled to be with you. I am honored to be on the program. I think this is the first time we've ever worked together. I'm not sure why.
It is.
I look forward to this and our future.
Thank you.
Hello to all of our listeners, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in for this program.
Beautiful.
And I'm going to follow your lead. I'm really excited to see where we go with this conversation today.
Me too. Well, it's interesting. I have to give it up. We were talking off air about beloved land of enchantment in New Mexico, and Deepak Chopra was on a couple years ago on ZGR when he was coming through. He spoke at UNM, and I was saying to Bruce, is there a reason why Bruce Lipton, of course, who was just on our show earlier this month, is there a reason why all of you incredible luminaries are gravitating or resonating with the land of enchantment, or maybe just explore that, because we know for us who live there or have lived there, it's a special energy and vibration. But I just wanted to see your thoughts before we even go on and delve into the world of Gregg Braden and all that you offer humanity.
Sure. Well, I don't know how far into the story you want to go. I think many of our listeners are familiar with my work and my story. I'm a scientist. I'm a degreed geologist, earth scientist with a strong background in the life sciences, and I did work in the corporations from the late 70s through the 80s and the early 90s. And my last corporate position, I was the first technical operations manager at Cisco Systems when they were developing the protocol converters and the internet support systems. And I left Cisco. And rather than going to another job, I took all of my savings and I bought land in northern New Mexico, just north of Taos. Mm-hmm. And I found I was living in the Bay Area, of course, working for Cisco. Yeah. And I woke up one morning and I asked myself a question. I said, I know that I'm going to leave and write my books full-time and teach. That was the reason I left. I was doing it part-time while I was in the corporations. So I made a choice to do it full-time. And I said, the question is, where will I do it from? And do I want to wake up every morning in a place that's convenient for me and has all the amenities that I need in life, which I've done all my life, or do I want to wake up surrounded by beauty every morning? And to make a long story very brief, the beauty won out. And let me ask this. Are you familiar with Waldorf schools, the Waldorf teaching method?
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Okay, so
yes.
I bought one of the first Waldorf schools that was built in North America in 1888 that was in need of sore need of repair and the land that went with that. And I bought that in 1991. And I have been repairing and renovating ever since. I think it's a lifetime proposition.
A labor of love.
Yeah, but people ask me all the time, they're in our community, in New Thought community, there's a lot of fear about earth changes, world changes, and people are always asking, where's a safe place to live, and
right.
And what I say to them is I could never tell you where you should live and what is safe for you. For me personally, I choose to live where my heart sings, where I'm at my happiest, where I'm at my best, where I wake up in the morning and I can't wait to get up I can't wait to start the day. And I'm just surrounded by this immense, magnificent, awesome beauty that drew people like Georgia O'Keeffe and Ansel Adams and D.H. Lawrence and people like that to northern New Mexico. And for me, that is where I choose to make my home. So while I travel the world frequently, and I'm actually in between trips right now so that we can have this conversation, and people always ask me, come live here, come live in our community, or come, support this organization or whatever, and I'm honored.
Are you near the Earthships, by the way?
Well, I know Michael Reynolds was the architect, the innovative architect that began building what are called Earthships that are, for listeners who may not be familiar, they were made from recycled materials and bermed. Some of them were actually in the earth rather than on the earth. I am north. I'm way north of where all of that is.
Okay.
Actually, an hour from the nearest grocery store and about a mile from the nearest neighbor. So New Mexico is, for me, it inspires me, and we're at 8,000 feet above sea level, and it's where for whatever reason, I'm at my best at that place, and that's what draws me to call it home.
Well, it's great. It's a great story, and it's a great truth. And you touched on something so poignant, is that everyone has to find their spot. I mean, I just moved from New Mexico, 15 years there, and I moved here, and within weeks I experienced Hurricane Irma for last year. So although that was a huge shakeup, I learned a lot, and I said, if everything's underwater, we'll just keep driving, and everything was absolutely intact. And this place makes my heart sing. And just as you said, everyone has to find that place. You can't tell somebody like anything else. So I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, there are all kinds of stories. I remember, and these are true case histories. There was a man in the 1990s, early 1990s, that was living in California, and that's when all the prophecies and predictions said California was going into the ocean. Do you remember when that was happening?
Oh, yeah. I'm from L.A., so you bet.
Afraid of losing everything to the ocean and flooding and water, so he moved into northern Missouri in 1993, and that was the year that the rains were so heavy, the Mississippi swelled out of its banks, and the Great Lakes of the United States and the Gulf of Mexico for the first time were connected by it looked like an inland sea. It looked like an ancient geologic map, and the Midwest was flooded. I know people remember the farmlands were flooded and communities were flooded. So the place he moved to, he lost everything to a flood, which just goes to show it's less about where you live, I think, and more about the fear that we allow sometimes to override our intuition and our truest sense of what it is that brings joy into our lives, what makes us happy. And for me, we are such finely tuned beings, and we are tuned to our world and our environment, and everyone's a little bit different, based on your heredity and genetics and DNA and all those things. So I think part of our life path, our life journey, is to find out, we can function anywhere pretty well, but where are we really at our best? Where does our body function really well, and do we feel really good? When you look in the mirror, where are your eyes like the whitest when you wake up in the morning, and where do you love the air that you breathe, and where do you savor the rich colors at sunset? And when you begin really tuning into those kinds of things, and there's subtle changes everywhere in the world, that helps us to find out where our place, where our home really is. So I am, everywhere is home while I'm there, everywhere I am in the world. But when I reach the gates to my property, when I come home from a long trip, I often have tears in my eyes. I'm crying, and I say to myself, this is my home, this is my home.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that. There's nothing better than that, especially for someone like you who travels everywhere and has seen many, many different cultures and demographics and experiences. There's a lot out there, and we just all have to be so grateful for what we have and realize the oneness potential, or the oneness factor?
Sure. Well, again, I think most of our listeners are probably familiar with the organization Humanity's Team. Organized actually, they tell the story in, I've just done the pre-recorded sessions that will air in just a couple of weeks. And so I got to hear the whole story. Steve Farrell, that founded Humanity's Team, actually put together a proposal with over 56,000 signatures to have a oneness day that he took to the United Nations in, I believe it's 2006. No, 2010. I'm sorry, 2010. And the UN Secretary General looked at it. He said that he was impressed, but he said, for the UN to do something like this, we're a big organization, it'd take a long time. He said, Steve, why don't you do it yourself? So Steve went from thinking his work was finished by handing the proposal off to the UN to realizing that his work was only beginning. Yeah. And that Global Oneness Day is now designed to coincide with the UN Day of Peace, so they're both on the same day. And it is a call for conscious awareness to the fact that while we may live in diverse cultures and diverse lands, and certainly with diverse belief systems, there's only one of us here. It's not so much about us versus them, it is about we. And we live on this beautiful planet that is undergoing a lot of change right now. We're undergoing a lot of change, and it's about cultivating the awareness of the fact that we are a global family and that we are going through a rare time in the history of our world, and I can talk about that a little bit from my perspective, and that for us to navigate these times in a healthy way, we need to learn new ways to think and new ways to live. So there are a number of panels that are presented on Global Oneness Day. I'm on the science panel, along with Dr. Bruce Lipton and others who are on that panel. And from my perspective, I'll just tell you, my feeling is the better we know ourselves, the less we fear change in the world. The better we know ourselves, the less we fear one another, and ultimately the less we fear ourselves and our own power. So my work in general, this is now the 34th year I've done this work in one form or another, and what I'm bringing to that panel are the new discoveries based in the best science of the modern world that are now overturning 150 years of scientific thinking when it comes to the way we think of ourselves. And the new discoveries, they're not theories and hypotheses and metaphors and necessarily, New Age thinking. I mean, this is rock-solid, peer-reviewed science that simply is not making it into the mainstream. And what it's telling us, and we can, delve into this on deeper levels, but the bottom line is that we are not what we have been told, and we are much more than we've ever believed. And much of what we've been told is based on the ideas of Charles Darwin that were introduced about 150 years ago in 1859. And when it comes to oneness, one of Darwin's principles was that evolution, the fundamental law of nature, the rule of nature, is competition and conflict and struggle. And he said it's because of competition, conflict, and struggle that we humans have won out over other species, and we are where we are today. That's an old way of thinking, and it's reflected in the world that is unsustainable and that we are struggling with right now. It's just reflected in our economic system. It's reflected in the corporate system, in the monetary system. What the new science is showing, and this is, and I know Bruce talked about this because Bruce Lipton, he always does, is that the new science, it's showing that nature, while we all know that competition and conflict happens, we're not denying that. The fundamental law, the rule of nature, is cooperation and what biologists call mutual aid. And the more conflict and the more struggle that we see in the world around us, that is the indicator that tells us how far we have strayed from nature's fundamental law. And if we're looking for harmony in our societies, in our world, and in our lives, we may want to think about honoring this deep, harmonious principle working with nature rather than going against this fundamental law.
Beautiful. Gregg, we're going to take a little break. Why don't we do this? We'll continue the conversation in a minute. We'll say thank you for listening, everyone. We'll be back in a moment. Spiritual Communities Network invites you to their 7th year anniversary celebration of the mystical and magical date of 11/11 with their upcoming event, SpiritCon, taking place this year on Pine Island at the beautiful setting of Green Planet Farm and Gardens. It's a day to connect, expand, and experience. Free to attend, enjoy a full day of local and renowned speakers sharing their wisdom of spirituality, mystical arts, and health and wellness. Enjoy readings and a variety of booths with many different products for enlightenment and well-being. Sponsored by Muscle Tuners International, Conscious Shift Magazine, the Holistic Chamber of Commerce of Southwest Florida, and our station here, Zeta Global Radio. For more information, please visit spiritualcommunitiesnetwork.com. We look forward to seeing you there.
Muscle Tuners International is a proud sponsor of Music to Heal the Earth, a collection of songs encouraging planetary mindfulness, one song at a time. At MTI, we believe in impacting people in their health and wellness, one person at a time. Discover how to switch on your muscles before you begin your favorite exercise activity for greater results. Better yet, become a licensed muscle tuner specialist and learn our proprietary kinesiology techniques to help others get fitness and recovery results faster. We invite you November 4th and 6th to an Introduction to Muscle Tuning gathering to be held in Southwest Florida at Paradise Wellness and Event Center in Bonita Springs. For more information, please visit www.muscletuners.fit. Be strong, be confident, be tuned.
Blessings, everyone. Lainie Sevante here, inviting you to the Mystical Magical World Tarot Play Shop, happening October 27th through 28th on the beautiful setting of Green Planet Farm and Gardens on Pine Island here in Southwest Florida. I want you to experience, and I'm looking forward to it myself, a total immersion of learning, being, and embodying our divine archetype as shown in Tarot's major arcana. Discover the depth of who you truly are and step into its power. I myself can't wait for this. The event is being facilitated by Teresina and Martin Watkins, the incredible creators of the 5th Tarot deck, which I use myself when giving readings through intuitive wisdom. They are masterful, wise, and will help you bring forward the new you. Consider it a high vibrational take on Halloween, complete with costumes, props, and the feeling of really being a kid again. We could all use that, right? Well, there are limited spots available for this, so register now at thefifthtarot.com, and I'll see you soon. So I was on the internet looking at the world of Gregg Braden, and there were so many quotes, so many things that we can go on, but talking about your upcoming lecture with Dr. Bruce Lipton from Chaos to Coherence, and I looked through all these quotes. And one of them that touched my mind, because I believe this is where the world is today, and this was your quote on when you made the Divine Matrix. I've written this book for one reason, to offer a sense of hope, possibility, and empowerment in a world that often makes us feel small, ineffective, and helpless. And that struck at such a chord with me because I feel so many of us are feeling that in today's times, and of course many times, but I just thought from that and then from the topic of your lecture, there was just a lot to talk about, and maybe we can help settle the wonderful listeners out there.
Well, absolutely. When we look at the things that are unfolding in the world today, and it is difficult to see so many of the things that are happening in the world. We're seeing a rise of hate, for example, hate based upon the color of our skin, or hate based upon our religion or our sexual orientation, or, just because we're different, and we see the atrocities that are committed not only on the battlefield in war, but the atrocities that are committed in our homes and our communities. And, as different as these things are from one another, what really became very clear to me, Lainie, when I was I was researching this for a book I was writing in 2016, is that all of these things are based upon a way of thinking. And while we can certainly pass laws to make hate illegal, and we can penalize someone that breaks those laws, those are Band-Aids. They're bandages, temporary fixes. If we're really going to bring about the kind of change that we know is possible in our world, we've got to change the way we think about ourselves and our relationship to the world. And so I began looking at where does that thinking even come from? Well, it comes from our family, it comes from our religion, it comes from our community, but a lot of it comes from school, from our textbooks, and what scientists have led us to believe about who we are and what our relationship is to our bodies and our world. And this is where people like Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, myself, many others, I mention those two because the three of us work and tour together frequently. But we've found that there are new discoveries based in the best science of the 21st century that change the way that we think about ourselves. And you would think that people would be really happy to know that. But the reality is that there is a reluctance and often a resistance. There is a resistance to share these discoveries in the mainstream. We're watching a battle play out. It's playing out in the media on many levels. It's playing out in our society and what we are being led to embrace. It is a battle to preserve what is called the standard model. The standard model is the old way of thinking about us, about where we've come from, about what our capabilities are and what our potential really is. And the old standard model has left us feeling, it's the model based on Darwin's ideas of separation, competition, conflict, struggle, scarcity. And it's the model that has told us that we are insignificant, that we are essentially powerless in the world, and powerless even when it comes to our bodies. If something happens with our bodies, we need to immediately go and find someone to intervene on our behalf.
Sure.
And I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm saying that is a way of thinking that we may follow. And what we now know is there's another way of thinking that empowers us with new information based on new discoveries that tell us that those Darwinian ideas that may be true for some forms of life, the science shows that it breaks down when it comes to humans, that we humans are the only form of life that have the ability, and I'm going to use this term very intentionally here, we're the only form of life that have the ability to self-regulate our own biology on demand. And what that means is we can sit down like no other form of life. We can sit down in a moment in time and say, in this moment, I choose to enhance my immune response. In this moment, I choose to awaken my longevity enzymes. In this moment, I choose to access my deepest states of intuition so that I know what choice to make in this relationship or in this healthcare decision. And we're the only forms of life that can do these things. We're the only forms of life that can consciously self-regulate our immune system and our nervous system when we feel threatened and our body begins kicking out all the stress hormones that are good in a short period of time. We're the only form of life that can self-regulate and begin to modulate those responses back into a healthy, regenerative, rejuvenation state. And when we begin to think about this, it changes everything about the way we've been taught to think about ourselves and one another. It changes our sense of insignificance that leads to the fear. So when we begin teaching young people, for example, that nature is their friend and that cooperation is the fundamental rule of nature, when we begin teaching young people that they are part of their body and not separate from their body, that they can communicate directly with their body, and teach them about the specialized cells in the human heart that are brain-like cells, but they're not in the brain. They're called sensory neurites in the heart. They think, feel, sense independently of the brain. And we teach young people how to access those neurons to make heart-based decisions and to connect with one another and themselves. you have a very, very different sense of yourself in the world. And this is so important.
Early on.
Yeah. Young people today, we all know it's a sad statistic. Media doesn't like to talk about it, but the cyberbullying is on the increase, and teen suicides.
Yeah. Yes.
Teen suicides, because the young people are criticized by their peers, and if these young people do not know who they are, if they don't have that very solid foundation of knowing who they are in the world and what their potential is, then it's easy to believe that criticism, and they often succumb to it in dangerous ways, including suicide. But if they know who they are, if we begin to instill these very significant values based upon science in our young people at an early age, then that criticism, they still receive it, but it means something very different to them. And that's just one place where the science now has this tremendous potential in terms of society.
Is your world quantum physics or everything having to do, someone said, oh, he's the quantum physics guy. I said, well, I'll be sure and ask him if he's the quantum physics guy. I mean, where does that play into it? And then where does spirituality weave into all of this?
Let me, I'll begin answering with a brief story. I did a radio interview recently. I do a lot of interviews, and rarely, every once in a while, we authors get what we call a hostile interview. So this interview began as a hostile interview, and the first thing the interviewer said to me, he said, Gregg, why can't you stick with one topic like everybody else? He said, man, you are all over the place. He says, are you talking about Earth magnetic fields? Are you talking about quantum physics? Are you talking about human biology? He says, why can't you just stay with one topic, And I said, everything that you have mentioned, and if you look closely, each of the books I have written explores one facet of us and our relationship to our bodies and to the world. So in a very real sense, I have stayed with one topic. It just is a big topic. It's us. And the guy said, okay, let's go to a station break. And then, we didn't talk about it anymore. So the quantum physics guy, there was a book that probably one of the most popular books. It was released in 2007 called The Divine Matrix.
I have it, yeah.
Yeah, it was very healing for me to write that book because it brought together the best science that was available at that time. And if I could do an update now because the science has gone so much further. But it was the science that validated at that time the fact that there is a field of energy that is everywhere all the time. It's the container for what we see occurring in the universe. It's a bridge between our inner and our outer world. When we have a prayer in our heart for a loved one halfway around the world, how does the prayer get from here to there? The field is the answer to that. And it's also a mirror. This quantum field is a very powerful mirror in the world around us for what we really, truly claim to believe in our heart. Not what we think we believe, but what our subconscious really believes. And it shows up in our relationships of romance and jobs and careers and health. So I think that's probably what this question is, because the quantum field played such a powerful role in that book, and it actually became a textbook. This book is a required reading in some university physics classes now.
Wow, bravo.
Yeah, so it's an important part of the conversation for me. It's not the whole story. It's a piece of the story, and it helps us to understand who we are and our relationship to the world. And I go back to the very beginning of our conversation. The better we know ourselves, the better equipped we are to embrace what the world shows us in a healthy way. And this is the key. It's not just about surviving. It's about thrive. How do we thrive? It's about thriving in the world that is presented to us. And when we begin to understand our potential, this enormous, extraordinary potential to tune our nervous systems in ways that no other form of life can, so that we can make very healthy choices in our lives. And this is where the spiritual principles come in. Because not religion, but the principles that the religion is based upon, these ancient spiritual principles, Somehow our ancestors understood a lot of these relationships. I'm not saying every single one, but a lot of them. And they left us the tools and the knowledge to know how to self-regulate, how to hone our biology, how to, for example, how to establish the link between our heart and our brain, the neurons in the heart and the neurons in the brain. How do you make that heart-brain connection? It's called heart-brain coherence, so that we have access not just to the heart, not just to the brain, but two organs become one very powerful system in our lives. And I write about this in the books. There's a book called Resilience from the Heart. There's a book called Human by Design. If you go to my live programs, you see this is a lot of what we do, sharing the techniques. And I'm just using this as one example because we are literally wired to harmonize our bodies with the earth, and that has a profound impact on health and longevity and our ability to thrive in the environment that for many people looks like a pretty unhealthy, pretty scary environment.
Sure.
So I know Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about these things, and I don't want to be redundant to what he's saying, but we support one another from very different perspectives.
But you synergize what you're saying, although it's his. It sounds the same, but it also sounds so uniquely different, and I see how they all merge, so it's beautiful. Well, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, more with Gregg Braden. You're listening to Zeta Global Radio.
Isla Mujeres is a Caribbean jewel off the coast of Cancun. Castilito del Caribe warmly invites you to enjoy our spectacular oceanfront villa located in the heart of El Centro and a short walk to Playa Norte, which is ranked one of the top 10 beaches in the world. With an ocean view of crystal clear turquoise waters overlooking both the Caribbean and Cancun city skyline, we offer a fabulous location for you to enjoy all the peace and tranquility you're looking for on vacation, while also taking in all the excitement the island has to offer, with activities either in walking distance or a golf cart day excursion away. Please visit CastilitoCaribe.com, www.CastilitoCaribe.com, and be sure to mention ZGR to receive a complimentary round-trip airport transfer for up to 4 people. We look forward to seeing you soon. The Holistic Chamber of Commerce in Southwest Florida now has chapters in Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and Naples. If you have a holistic business or practice and want to network with like-minded beings in the medical and healing arts, natural and eco-living and spiritual communities, you're welcome to come to a meeting and see what we're all about. For more information, please visit www.holisticchamberofcommerce.com and select your nearest city. We look forward to seeing you soon. In the depth of a spiritual ceremony, the heartbeat of the drum and shaking of the rattle bring you closer to a heightened state of awareness within. Experience the richness of nature's spirit drums. They are expertly and lovingly handcrafted with an infusion of sacred animal spirit and healing energies. Hand-stitched rawhide rattles used in sound healing, energy clearings, and journey work are filled with the powerful vibration of crystals such as amethyst, citrine, jade, and garnet. Purchase yours today by visiting naturespiritdrums.com. Zeta Global Radio listeners enjoy a special 10% discount when entering ZETA at checkout. For our international listeners, please visit the website on how you may purchase Nature Spirit drums and rattles.
Well, now I have a better understanding of where you are going with the topic for your November 8th through 11th symposium, conference, workshop. What do we call it that you and Dr. Bruce Lipton are going to have at Hyatt Tamaya there in New Mexico?
You know, we like to call it an experience.
Okay, I'm sure it was going to be one of them, but it wasn't.
First of all, the event is held in what used to be your backyard and my backyard here in the beauty of the high desert of northern New Mexico. But it's in a very unique location. It is a beautiful Hyatt property that is located on native land. So
Yeah.
it is staffed by people from the native Pueblo, from the Santa Ana Pueblo. And it is isolated, so you don't have the diversions of a mall and traffic and city noise. I mean, there's horseback riding, there is, hiking along the river. It's just a beautiful environment.
Sacred container. I'm going to call it that.
And we have people from 16 different nations that are going to converge for this conference. And it is a combination. Bruce and I both are scientists. We share the discoveries, but what I'd like to do is go even beyond the discovery itself and apply what does that mean in our lives, and how do we develop the techniques that help us to apply that discovery, in our everyday lives. So it is it's a very visual program, multi-sensory, very fast-moving. It is 4 days, and I have the honor of sharing a stage with my dear, dear, dear friend, my spiritual brother and colleague, the magnificent Dr. Bruce Lipton, who we have known and worked and toured together now for almost 30 years, if you can believe that.
Wow.
I know.
No, I didn't know that. That's
People
wonderful.
used to think we looked alike, but I think that was at another time. They don't say that so much anymore.
You think alike. You think alike.
We do think alike. That's true, yeah.
How do you feel about the world today, if you could just put it in a nutshell? And I just want to get your thoughts on that and then lead it to the fact, and I'll just tie this in and then I'll let you roll with it. I hear from so many luminaries who come on the show about the need to get the work out because of the world today of what we all do, believe, feel, think, and know. And yet mainstream has still not hooked into getting a sense of wanting to know more from all of you incredible beings. I mean, to extent, of course, you and Deepak Chopra, yes. And we still need to get out there more so we could really wake up this mass world of need.
I'm going to begin with the second question, and that will lead into my answer to the first. I personally, I think everything, I trust in the process. I trust in the timing, and I think everything is perfect. What I've found is it is impossible to convince or persuade anyone of anything until that individual is open to a new way of thinking. So, we see this all the time. We'll have a husband or a wife, for example, will come to a seminar somewhere in the world, and they'll say, my spouse at home doesn't think this way. How do I convince them of this material? And what I say is you cannot convince or persuade anyone. What you can do is live in your life whatever our time together has meant to you and whatever you've learned. You can live it in your life. You can apply it to your daily challenges and your daily joy in life. And what happens is other people, by example, will begin to see, and a lot of this is on a subconscious level, subconscious cues. We begin to see that, people in our family or in the workplace, they begin to solve their problems differently. They are happier solving the problems. They're healthier. They're taking fewer sick days off of work. They're more willing to, and people want to work with them. And other people respond to what they have seen, and then that is where the opening comes. They say, how did you do that? Or why are you thinking this way? And when that happens, that's when there's an openness. Okay, so I'm saying that in general. In the world, there has been a way of thinking that's been established, and it's called the Standard Model. And I mentioned this briefly before. The Standard Model is where we go when we feel threatened. We always go back to what we've been taught. And this, to me, is fascinating. We are what are called self-referencing beings. That's the term that scientists use. What that means is that we establish our personal well-being based upon the world around us and what's happening. So what's happening right now is we have established our sense of well-being based upon a story of how the world should work, how people should behave, how governments should work, how economies should work, and all of that's changing. And because it's changing, we feel uneasy, not you and me or our listeners, but I'm saying a lot of society in general. It causes an unease unless we know who we are. And this is when we begin to embrace the deepest truths of our personal power. then the external changes, we can't stop them, but they take on a different significance. They no longer threaten us, and we feel empowered to navigate those changes in a healthy way. And, it's really rewarding for me. I see this happen all the time. People, once they begin to first even know that they have this potential within them, and they begin to embrace their personal power, they gain this confidence, and they look at the world and they say, bring it on. Bring on the changes, because I know that I have everything I need to navigate the changes. So with that in mind, the first question that you asked, how do I feel about the world? I've never been more optimistic about the world, about my nation, I was just in Europe, about the European nations. I was there last week. I've never been more optimistic about our planet because now we know what doesn't work. If we were trying to plow through the changes, we've heard that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again, expecting different outcomes. If we were plowing through the changes that we're seeing in the world right now and trying to solve them the way that we've always solved our problems, that would be insanity, because we know it's not working. But what's happening now is people did try to do that for a while. The UN has tried to do that. The governments have tried to do that, American government, the European Union. And it's very clear that this old way of thinking has become obsolete in the presence of the world that we have today. The world changed. So there is an openness that we rarely see, an openness that is willing to embrace new thinking and new ideas. And for me, that's where the action is. Because the new ideas are there, and they've been around. A lot of our listeners have been thinking this way. We're talking to the choir. And the choir has been singing the praises of peace and cooperation, for the last 2 generations. But the world didn't see the need to embrace it because everything looked like it was working. Now that it's not working so well, then the world is open, saying, what else can we do? What's another way of solving these problems? So the choir has had this opportunity, this time, to develop and refine these ideas so that they're there when we need them. You wouldn't want to wait until the moment the problem occurs to start thinking about a new answer or a new way of thinking. So we've got all the answers. We have the technological answers for food, energy, communication. We have the answers for conscious evolution and new ways of thinking and living in our lives. We've had them for a long time. But now there's a willingness to embrace those answers. I'll give you a perfect example. Bruce Lipton and I'm just referring back to Bruce because I know he was a former previous guest of yours. We were invited to speak at the United Nations not long ago.
Beautiful.
He as a life scientist and me as an earth scientist. But coming together, we were invited to talk about, from our perspective, what we see happening in the world, what are the cycles, what are the trends, what can we reasonably expect, and how, the UN was asking, how is it that we can position ourselves in terms of resources and, and thinking and budgets and things like that for what's happening. And Bruce and I, in our own ways, we both said pretty much the same thing. As an earth scientist, I tend to look at big cycles of time, vast expanses of time, and then hone in on the cycles and the time of the present. So what I began that conversation with was I said, we're living the convergence, a rare convergence of 3 cycles. Any one of these cycles would be enough to change the way we think and live, but all 3 of them are converging in our lifetime. One of them is climate, and we know the climate is changing. Yeah. One of them is the cycles of economy. Economic cycles, we're living the end of a cycle that began about 66 years ago and the birth of a new one, and a lot of people today don't know that, or they don't recognize what those cycles mean to us. So that's a second cycle. And the third cycle, the people at the UN were not familiar with, and it is the cycle of human conflict. And people say, doesn't it just happen? Doesn't conflict just happen randomly whenever it happens? And the answer is, not really. Conflict is directly linked. We are influenced by natural rhythms of the sun, natural rhythms of the earth, magnetic highs and lows that influence the magnetic fields of the human heart and our perception, then the bottom line is when those magnetic fields are high, we are more cooperative, less aggressive. When the magnetic fields are low, it's just the opposite. And we are in a low point, moving to a low point, the lowest right around the year 2020. So it doesn't mean that we must have conflict. It means that we are vulnerable and susceptible to conflict. And it also means that we are living the greatest opportunity for peace. Because if you look at when the cycles of war and peace have happened, the peace has always occurred at the tops and the bottoms of these cycles. So when you look at all of those cycles converging, it gives us a reason to understand, what in the world is going on. This is what it is. There's a change in the world, and that change has created an opening and a willingness to embrace new ways of thinking. And your guests and many of our listeners are among the experts that now have those new ways of thinking ready to go. So there is an openness, a willingness to hear these. And I believe I'm not really so concerned about getting the work out there, because I think the work is received as it is received by those who who are in a place where the information is meaningful, where it's accessible to them in their lives, and we all learn differently, and this is the beauty. We all learn differently. So my language and these ideas, they may not be the words that maybe someone's kids need to hear in the family living room, but the parents can take these ideas and put them into their own family language. It's not my language, and share them with the young people, and this is how consciousness evolves. So we are at this evolutionary turning point, and the reason I'm so optimistic is because the way that nature creates changes is it always happens, it's always the same. Nature will build systems that become more and more and more complex until they reach a point where the complexity is unsustainable. And then the system will collapse and give way to a higher order of sustainability. And that's where we are right now. We're collapsing, not in a day, not in a month, but in our lifetimes. And if you know this, and if you can step back and look at the big picture, it gives meaning, it gives context. The collapses are quick, they're intense, and it's knowing that they don't last all that long. It's what comes after. So we are moving toward this global community, a global family, cooperation. We have to learn to cooperate, or it's not going to work, because of the nature of the world that we live in. And I'm seeing a willingness to embrace that behind the scenes, government levels, scientific levels, religious levels, and I'm also seeing it publicly. And I'm also a realist. I'm seeing a lot, in my opinion, of unnecessary pain to get to that point. I think we're taking a circuitous route, but I believe that we are moving in that direction. And for that reason, I'm very optimistic, and I'm honored to be a part of the process to whatever degree I can contribute.
And so it is. Gregg, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule. Very busy man, very popular. And I also want to acknowledge you for making people feel, at least this is my opinion, my feeling safe to talk about everything that is going on. There are listeners here who are just knowing there's more to life, more than what they've been told or brought up. And they're searching for shows like this and people like you who are providing answers in a way that makes them feel okay to look and explore deeper within themselves. So I want to acknowledge you for that as well.
Well, I don't know who that listener is, but my heart goes out to that listener. I want to thank them for their willingness to support these kinds of programs. It's rare. I just came back from Western Europe, and these kinds of programs you're not hearing so much out of Europe. You're hearing them from other parts of the world. But this is where these new ideas come from. This is how the information is disseminated. So I want to thank our listener for taking the time to support this format, and I want to thank you, Lainie, for all that you're doing to make this information possible, and for for keeping me in mind as a guest. I'm honored. I appreciate you inviting me onto the program today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Trice Massage Therapy and Skincare is Southwest Florida's premier holistic and wellness spa to relax and rejuvenate your well-being. Founded by Lucille Trice, this enlightened haven located in Cape Coral offers a variety of massage therapies including Swedish, deep tissue, and trigger point massage. Trice offers detoxifying body wraps and facials using natural organic ingredients to pamper your skin and restore balance and health. Visit their Trice Massage Therapy and Skincare Facebook page or call 239-672-0526 and book your experience today. Mention ZGR and receive a complimentary ionic foot detox experience. Welcome back to Zeta Global Radio. Wow. Are you feeling the wow that I'm feeling? This was such an honor, such a tremendous opportunity to share time and space with Gregg Braden, such a leading icon, luminary of our time, and helping so many people open up to the truth of who they are, the truth of their human potential. He tours all over the world. Please go to Gregg Braden, that's 2Gs.com, and see he's got 12 books now published in over 40 languages. For those of you who are in other respective countries, you can learn more about his work. And we are big fans here at Zeta Global Radio. So grateful for the day. And if you feel called to share this show with other people you know, just wanting to learn more about how they can grow, expand, learn more about the world today, who they are inside their own world, please share this show. We are on Zeta Continuum, our YouTube channel. You could subscribe there, and then you get an early listen of all our shows. Of course, we're on Facebook. You could like us there. We're on ZetaGlobalRadio.com, iTunes, pretty much everywhere where we can be to get the work out about these incredible guests we have here who are moving the world forward in such prolific ways where we need it the most right now. So thank you to all of you for listening, being a part of our world. We're so grateful for you every week for tuning in, sending us your feedback on the shows, how they impacted you. It means the world to me and my husband, Howard, who produces the show. This is an absolute labor of love for us, and we are so glad to be here of service. Have a blessed week to all of you. Take care. Bye-bye.